Yeah, we're here. So it's going to go live in just a moment. And then you can go back and refer people to this YouTube conversation and say, hey, yeah, here we are. So
cool.
Hey, all right. That works. Perfect. Okay. You can hear me?
Yep.
You can see me?
Yeah.
I can see you. Nobody else can be seen. And that's the way it works. Don't worry, everybody else who's tuning in and is muted, or at least should be muted. If you're not muted, I'm going to mute you. So don't talk. All of you other folks that are joining us, thank you for joining us. This is we just started this last week, and we're going to keep doing it as long as we have the opportunity. We love it. Calling it Missions Monday, and getting an opportunity for us to connect with via technology and all of this, connect with our missionaries and see what is going on in their lives, and especially during this time. So this is a lot of fun, and we're really excited about it. So this is Mark and Crystal Bunnell, and Mark and Crystal are presently in the Dominican Republic. Mark sent me a message about an hour ago that said we don't have power and we might not be able to do this, but the power has been turned back on in the city just because of this. So we're excited about that. So Mark, Crystal, go ahead and tell us where you are in the Dominican Republic and what are you guys, what was your original mission and what are you doing now?
So we're in the city of Jarabacoa, and kind of the best way for Southern Californians to get a glimpse of what Jarabacoa is like is it's kind of like Big Bear, where Big Bear is up the mountain from LA, but there's the big city down below. And up in Big Bear, you have a lot of people that come here on the weekends for touristry, to go hiking or four-wheel driving or whatever. And if you need to go to any of the bigger stores, you have to go down the mountain. But it's not like Big Bear in that it's way more populated. And that there's a lot of people who live here that aren't just there for their weekend cabin and whatnot. And so there's a lot of agriculture going on, and there's more of a kind of bustling city center. But so it's called Jarabacoa. And there's a lot of like rivers and waterfalls and a lot of really beautiful areas. And then it's just outside of the bigger city down the mountain is Santiago. That's the second biggest city in the country. And then, so we're really blessed that we're up in the mountains because it's at least 10 to 15 degrees cooler up here always than in Santiago. So that's really nice. And what we got here in January 10th. So we're almost at 5 months. Yep, January, yep, into May. And we're working with Students International. And so kind of to briefly explain what they do is we do long-term community development. So of the staff here, what's really cool is there's only like 5 or 6, right, of American staff. Yeah, about 5 or 6 out of 30 somewhere in there. It's like 6 out of 30. We'll go with that as the number, but it's not super accurate. American staff, and the rest are Dominicans from the communities that we're working in. Some of them, a couple of them are local pastors, and this is what they do. Because there's like the church we go to, the head pastor is also a OBGYN. So with Students International, he's able to use his medical practice as a ministry as well, and intermingle it with the church and all of that. And so there's that ministry that's going on that's really led by the Dominicans in the cultures and the communities that they're in and that they grew up in. And then we also host short-term trips or teams or whatever you want to call it It's mainly groups from the United States, and every now and then we get some Canadians to come by. And they're usually here for 1 to 2 weeks. And the participants get to get plugged into some of the different ministry sites. So we have things like healthcare, dentistry, physical therapy, special education, which is cool. We have the only special education school in the city. There's a couple preschools, and then there's some women's social work sites as well. And yeah, so the outreach participants get to kind of choose most of the time. Sometimes they don't get their preference, a site to go to and to serve at, and to kind of learn about Dominican culture and learn about what God is doing here. And to hopefully, our hope at the end of their 2 weeks is that they would have had some sort of interaction with God. Maybe it's through quiet time, through a conversation with someone in the community or with their leader, and that they would be impacted and transformed a bit to be able to go better reach their community that they came from. Because almost every participant at the end of their 2 weeks is like, I'm coming back, I'm gonna live here. And we're just, okay, see you soon, type of thing, and then 2 months go by, we haven't heard from them or anything. But and God's put us all in different places to impact those around us and to reach those around us. So that's our hope with outreach teams. In that, anything there? I guess what we do.
Yeah. So typically I would be hosting the short-term teams that Mark just described. So I would do all the prior planning with them, contacting the team leader, assuring most details are figured out. And then once they get here, I give orientation, and then kind of I'm their go-to person for a lot of the things that they might need. And my partner, his name's Alberto, he does a lot of the community contacts. So he gets transportation ready for them. He gets a lot of the food prepared. Well, he communicates with the person that gets the food. And a lot of, he does a lot of the community stuff. And so typically we would be having teams right now, kind of full swing of like receiving teams every 2 weeks or every other week. But with the pandemic and a lot of borders closing and a lot of traveling that has had to stop, we've stopped receiving teams. And so right now our time looks like working from home, doing trainings over Zoom call. And we've been doing these online videos on team building, teamwork, what makes a good team, and kind of going through that, kind of figuring out how we can best all work together and what that looks like cross-culturally. And we've also been giving testimonies in small groups, so it's been really good.
So what exactly has it been like in the Dominican Republic with the COVID-19? What is the government's response? What have they been asking you guys to do? Because we know what it's like for us, and we get a picture of what it's like in other countries, but what's it like for you guys?
So the borders are closed to come in, but we could leave, but to go back to the US, but pretty much they're closed. Like, so no one's coming in. And it's a government approved state of emergency and has been since March 20th. So I don't know. And we will be in the state of emergency at least until May 25th. And we have a curfew. So we have to be in by 5 p.m. until 6 a.m. No one's supposed to leave their homes at all. But thankfully, because we have a little dog and we live in an apartment, so she has to go out to go to the bathroom and stuff. We live on a street that's we're outside of town a bit and then back and down a road. So that like after this, I'm going to take the dog out. I don't have to worry about getting arrested or something. But for the most part, if you're out after curfew, you pretty much just get picked up and taken to jail. And then we have a friend who does some prison ministry. So that process looks super different depending on who picked you up, what kind of day they had and all that. And I don't know. But besides that, the streets used to be kind of empty. Like people weren't going out as much. All the restaurants were closed. Like a couple restaurants were doing like takeout, but it seemed to be more so the ones that they lived behind. So then you could call and then they'd go make the stuff and they didn't have to be like staffed. But at this point, most of the restaurants are just opening up again, even though officially it's still a state of emergency. But because after about a month or so that we've been in here, like not many people can work from home. There's not that option. So a lot of people are just having to get out to go back to work. And it seems to be, at least right now, as long as you're not out after curfew, that no one's really getting in trouble for that because it's like understood. But on the surface, it seems to look like state of emergency and whatnot. But it's more like slowed down some space between the lines, like in the grocery store. But here where we're at, like I said, where this is like a Big Bear, where it's a bit more of a sleepier town, no one's going to be doing anything too crazy. Our pastor that's on staff, he is the pastor of a church down the mountain in the bigger city. And he said down there, it's been a bit crazier because there hasn't been work. People haven't had anything to do. So there's been a lot of baseball in the streets until the cops pull around the corner and then they head inside. So there's been a couple videos that we've seen where to enforce social distancing, where this is the stuff that like I enjoy being here because the authorities will do this, but people would throw a fit in the States, I think. But so there's a fire truck driving around in the bigger cities. And if you're closer than the 3 feet, here they're really going for 3 feet. That's the hope. Because culturally, this is okay in a grocery line here. So they're going with arm's length. Arm's length is the hope we're going for. But anyway, they'll spray you with the hose from the top of the fire truck to enforce the social distancing measure in some of the bigger cities, which is, I think is great. It's like, yeah, follow the rules or you're getting soaked type of thing. Depending on how high blast the stream is,
That sounds fantastic. I'm all, So weird, different, but it sounds also very similar. Actually, it sounds a little bit harsher than what we're enduring right now. So that's crazy. And yeah, like you said, that has a dramatic impact on what you guys are doing and what you were called to do. I do want to involve, so again, we have a whole group of people from the church that are jumping on and they're joining in here. And I'm hiding all of those participants. But if you're on here, part of the church, and you have a question for Mark and Crystal, something about it's an ask me anything, right? You want to ask them, throw it in the chat, give me a question so that I know, or you can even private chat me down at the bottom of the screen. There's a chat button. Write that chat to me, that question, and I'll turn on your camera and let you ask them, or I can just ask them for you. But we definitely want this to be an interactive experience. It's pretty cool because these are missionaries that we're able to support, and missionaries that actually Mark grew up in our church for the most part. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because that's a little bit of a rundown of your experience, but and right now it sounds like your experience is pretty similar to what we're experiencing in terms of there's not a lot to report.
Mm-hmm.
Other than you did get a dog. Do you want to introduce your dog?
Is she still asleep?
Well,
Yeah, so yeah, we'll introduce the dog. Oh, yeah, pick her up. She's fine. Oh, well, so a couple of our friends that that were working with us, SI, they still work with SI. This is their dog, Angel, but they were debating moving back to the States in August. And then with all the, so one of Melody, she was doing the accounting for the organization here in Harabacoa. And once we switched to working from home, they thought, well, we're already working from home. Let's get to the States. Their children are there, their kids are older. And then we can be with family and we'll just sit tight in Pittsburgh. It's where they're from. So, but they needed someone to take care of their dog, and we'd stayed with them the first month we were here. So they gave us Angel. She is a handful.
Is she? Because she looks pretty mellow.
So today, what I figured out we have to do is that if we have to do something like this where we need her to not bark, we have to take her out and just chuck the ball down the street again and again and again until she lays down, and then I have to chase her to get her even more tired.
Wow.
So she's
You've done all of that today just to get ready for this call.
Yep.
Yeah, that was right after dinner, so I almost barked too. It was good.
So I do have a question from Mike Pierce, who wants to know how the adjustment has been from the U.S. to the Dominican Republic. What's that been like for you?
I guess it's been pretty good. The language, I think Mark has been doing a phenomenal job. He's taking classes with a director of a school here called Bunnells. But there are certain words that mean different things here as opposed to Mexico. So I am slowly but surely learning the hard way of saying it, then people looking at me like, wait, what do you mean? Or are you sure you wanted to say that? And then I look at them like, please tell me what I just said, because your face told me I said something else. So that's been pretty fun. And I don't know, just taking it day by day, really. There's really great days where we go to the grocery store and everything works out. And there's other days where they ask me to weigh something and I don't understand what they're telling me because they're wearing a face mask. So it's harder to understand. And I get flustered and give up. So there's good days and bad days, just kind of learning to go day by day. And especially with the pandemic, I think it's been kind of funky going from like unemployed to finally getting here and having a job, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, wait, you got to stay home and there's no teams. Oh, okay, well, Lord, you're in control, and kind of just trusting in God day by day and figuring out like what it is that God has for me during this time. And like, yeah, I guess that's what it's been like for me.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well then, yeah, I think in some ways, since being in San Diego, like we're used to there being at least depending on, what communities you live in or drive through, like I'm used to there being a mix of like Spanish words on billboards, or on the radio you can always get some like Spanish language, so that hasn't been too off-putting. And even Spanish like music, I started listening to it like a year ago just to help practice with that. And so, but that's helped because music is really big here. Like everyone listens to music super loud. So there's no such thing as like a noise complaint here. Usually by 11, all the neighbors will turn it off and stuff. But the super loud music, but I like all the music and I've heard it before and I know the artists. So even superficial stuff like that has helped. And then the language has been tough because it's kind of like especially out in the more rural communities, it's kind of like a very rural New Zealand type of accent where it's like, we are speaking English, but I don't understand a word that you just said. And so sometimes it'll be like, oh, I mean, I know that you're speaking Spanish because you have to be, but I didn't understand a single word you just said. And so for me, often that happens at the bank because I feel like pressured. I just waited in line for like an hour. I get to the counter, I give him the money to deposit it, and then he says something and I what on earth? So the hard part has been like little stuff that like we feel like we should have. Like I should be able to just go to the bank and deposit money with no problems. But then I leave like a little bit frustrated, like, man, I wish I knew what he said or something. And so it's like, that's a silly example, but it's the days that are tough are when there's like a lot of stuff like that piles up, like a lot of little things.
Yeah.
So that's mostly what it is when like expectations are different. It's like, oh, like the first day we got our washer, we didn't know how to use it. It's a like 3 or 4 step process because the hose that came with the washer to put water in the washer wasn't the right size for the stuff we have in the house. So we use a bucket from the sink and then we pour it in by hand. We also bought a cheap washer.
Oh, I hear Angel.
Nope.
Oh, never mind. That's somebody else on our screen. Oh, my fault. I'll get to muting everybody again. Okay, that's funny. So I want to get over to this question. It's something that I have on my list. And then again, if you're on here, send in your questions in the chat. And if you want to ask that question on video, I'll pull you up and that would be great as well. But one of the things that I really like about supporting you guys as missionaries is that you are, I believe, millennials.
Sure.
I think so.
I'll take it.
You're a younger generation, and that's a pretty exciting thing because the gospel's supposed to be keep going to each and every the next generation. And so supporting missionaries that are next generation is really exciting to me. But you guys are recent college grads. When did you graduate there?
I finished in 2016.
2018?
Yeah.
2018.
2018, 2016. You got married in last year, right?
2018. Yeah.
Okay, 2 years. So it's been, but the thing is, you're young, and that particular generation, your generation, it seems like there's a lot of you got the older generation complaining about the younger generation and the younger generation complaining about the older generation. And you guys know my heart is always to be this intergenerational, cross-generational coming together. But that's challenging, as you guys know firsthand. So I kind of wanted to hear from you and from the younger generation, what are some things that generations that are older than you could be doing, the church that's older could be doing to help encourage your peers, not just necessarily in ministry, but in being a part of the church and having a robust faith in following God's call on their life. And so this is not exactly a mission question. It's more, I mean, it is, but it's more a you and your peer group. What do you think would help reach them or encourage them?
I think, at least from my experience, I've always appreciated, I guess, be just like when someone, especially someone who is more advanced in life than me, is interested in what I'm doing more than like a, hey, how's it going? But like when some people would be like, oh, like, what are you studying at school right now? And sometimes people would hear like chemistry and then they're like, oh, hey, I heard this about like this thing in this medicine. Do you know anything about that? And it's something like a common point that we could kind of have a relationship about, that for me, especially when I was in college, made me feel comfortable than like approaching an older person, just about anything, or saying hi. And especially having grown up at Living Way, and then, seeing the same people since I'm 5 is kind of like, oh, they were always way bigger and way older, like this unattainable friendship type of thing.
Yeah.
But I think for me, some of it too was going like to rescue mission, and riding down with Milton, and then we get burritos after with Milton and Garland, and then there'd be all the younger guys, like the Pierces would be there too, and just that, where we kind of get to know each other in that, and there was never any like where someone had to put on the right lingo or whatever. Like younger people always see through that. And even when I was working with high schoolers, like I can't even try. Guys, what does this mean? What is Snapchat? What is all this stuff? And it was more of like a genuine, like, even if it was awkward, but like a genuine interest. Like, what are you up to type of thing? What things do you like? I always found that very welcoming, I guess.
How about you, Crystal? Because now I know Mark's experience growing up in the church, and you and I have talked about your experience, but most of the people watching may not have the knowledge of your upbringing and background. So could you talk a little bit about what that was like, and if you have insight into, I know everybody watching is excited about young people in missions and following Jesus. So any tips that you have that help, how older folks helped to invest in your faith to grow to this point, I'm sure that those would be awesome to hear.
Yeah, I grew up going to church almost every day. My dad was super involved and my mom was too. And so I think that kind of just, you have to go. You're younger, you can't drive, and you end up in church. But I think one thing that really encouraged me a lot, especially growing up in the church, was being offered opportunities of leadership. And I think I was never offered the opportunity, but I think I was kind of stubborn and like, wait, that was offered to my friend. I want to do this too. Can I? And like going for it and asking. But I think it probably would have meant a lot more to me if my youth pastor was like, hey, I think you would be really good at this, and I want to offer this opportunity for you, or to you, to serve in this way. And also recognizing that they will probably mess up, and that's okay, because we all do, and like that's where grace comes in. But I think that has actually been the most impactful thing for me in ministry and missions, even in college. Just having the pastor that actually married us, he's the one that offered me my first ministry opportunity to serve in a leadership position. And I had always heard about missions and I had always wanted to be a part of it, but I had never been offered that opportunity. And so being offered that, and it kind of gave me like a different perspective of what I was capable of doing, as opposed to like, those are special people, like only special people get called to that, or like, I don't know, it just sometimes feels like you're not like worthy or part of that. And so I guess like being willing to like be present and look for those opportunities is really impactful. And also just building that relationship, like Mark said, getting to know like what they're interested in, what they are doing outside of church, even if, I don't know, just little ways for you to learn about them. And then even through that, you are able to recognize like some opportunities for them within the church or within, I don't know, whatever that may look like. But definitely.
So one of the questions in here was about, is your Dominican church that you're a part of, what's that like? Is it cross-generational? Or is it kind of younger? Is it multiple? Is it a Dominican church, or is it an expat church? What kind of church is it? And are you seeing the kind of things that you're talking about here? Are you seeing those on display in the life of your church? And how, I guess?
So yeah, the church that we go to, when we first got here, our pastor staff guy here told us just go to all of them, try them all. And then we talked to Pastor Daniel with you, and you kind of gave us the opposite advice. You said, like, just pick one and stick with it, like now. And so pretty much, I think that week was after we'd gone to this church, and like, all right, we'll go with that one. But what was really important to us was that, so when there are teams here, we take the students to churches, and usually they go to 2 different ones because there's just so many in the outreach. And so the one that we go to is one of the ones that the teams go to. So that if there's a team and Crystal needs to be with them in case they have any questions or whatever, we can keep that consistency in going to the same church and being part of that same group and the same fellowship and whatnot. And then, so the church, it is almost a bilingual church, sort of. I guess you could say it is. Everything is in Spanish, and then the screen is all in English behind them, except during the songs. Those are all in Spanish. But a lot of the head pastor, he speaks English and Spanish. He's the doctor. And then we know a couple other people there who work at the bilingual school that Crystal mentioned that my Spanish teacher's from. So they all speak good Spanish and English. And then what's interesting, it is very much like an intergenerational. And so right now their building is being built. They're building a new building. So they're meeting at the Students International base. So I don't know if this part is just because they're in a temporary building with limited rooms, but the kids are in the service the whole time, every Sunday type of deal. And then there's older people, and it's like families that come together. So I don't know if kids will do their own kids' church or if that's just a building thing, because it's just one room that they're using in our chapel. But for the time being, it's super intergenerational. And that was another part that I think where I felt like this is a good spot to be, because it wasn't like this is just geared at the gringos, or this is just geared at the young kids or whatever. Yeah. And then, do we have responsibilities in the church? At the moment, no. My Spanish teacher found out from someone else that I play guitar, and I didn't tell him. So I am teaching my Spanish teacher how to play guitar once we can see each other in person again. So I think I'm being indirectly told that I have some responsibilities coming up, but today, no, not yet.
Kind of along these lines, because this is a fascinating conversation to me, is like, what do we do in terms of this next generation and raising up? And you guys are such an inspiration. Are there things, do you think that, again, you both, Mark, you grew up in Living Way Church, Crystal, you grew up in the same church your whole life, and they're intergenerational churches, which means that they're churches that are intentional about engaging the next generation, but sometimes even the best intentions don't always come across as such. And there's things that are probably unintentionally done that push younger people away. And so, hey, this is a safe space, and I think it's a great opportunity where I say it's a safe space because it's streaming live on YouTube, and it'll be there forever. And anybody, we don't even know who's watching, but like, if you could talk to people that were older, not just on the positive side, which you did earlier, and just praising the contributions, but things that they maybe have done that have pushed away some of your peers, your friends, and they probably didn't do it on purpose. I probably didn't do it on purpose, but maybe just not even knowing, we've pushed people away. And not only like what have we done, but how can we bring them back? What would be some ways that we could go and bridge that? And, you know, because I want to see your friends. I mean, obviously, Mark, you were in my youth ministry. And so, you know, I know a lot of your friends and peers, and not all of them are following Jesus anymore. And that grieves me. I don't know what role, you know, what thing I may have unintentionally done to do that, right? But what can I do to try and reach them? And I think that would be a benefit for everybody to hear. And I don't even know if you've thought about it, but yeah.
I have a short thought and then I'll let you go. I think about this a lot because I don't have any good answers, but because even when I was working at the church in La Jolla and I was more or less in charge every now and then, or I was covering while they figured out who to hire and whatever, there was a group of kids that were kind of like, all right, these are my guys. Like we stuck with it for 3 years, and I don't even know what it is like there. And well, I think so much of it does come down to like their home dynamic and what they were hearing from their parents and what they grew up hearing and whatnot. That played a huge role, where there's like 2 or 3 of them where I'm like, I don't know what I did, but you turned out so great. And it's obviously, it's not me, it's also like what the Holy Spirit is doing in their lives and how much they're open to that, or how much they're just there to be there and putting on a good front for me. Like, all right, I'll be nice, I'll tell Mark the church answers type of thing, whatever. And then I was thinking about that, and then thinking about growing up in a youth group, and like some of my friends that when I see stuff on Instagram or something, very rarely, I'm like, what are you up to? What's going on? And I can't, like, they had the same youth leaders that I had, the same youth pastor. They were there for the same sermons type of thing. But I think and I don't have a specific example of this going like poorly, but I think that when we're younger, like, we know that we're stupid and we know that we're doing stuff that's really dumb. But I think some of it comes out of, okay, here's the thought I'm trying to grasp at. That I think, and my friend who's a psychologist brought this up, so I think it's more right than I think it's right, that this younger generation, especially like starting with me, where I'm a bit half and half, the younger generation is a bit more honor shame type of interactions, where the older generation is more classic, things are black and white. And I'm somewhere in between, and then where I don't know what the heck I think about a lot of stuff. But so with the younger generation, are probably more likely to feel judged or shamed or whatever with some sort of direct, like, hey, don't do that, or especially if other people are around type of thing, and are looking for more of acceptance that might just be like, we have dinner once a month or something, and you guys are always welcome here. And then after that can get to the like, all right, buddy, so what's going on? Which that was what with some of the high school guys that I was working with, I found that to be a lot more helpful. If I was just super upfront, like, hey, I saw this on Instagram or whatever, like, what are you doing? They would write me off and leave. And for whatever reason, but I was able to get a better relationship with them. Like, they would kind of just write me off as being older, like, oh, I don't get it. But I think that if you can get it to where there's a good relationship there already, then people don't write each other off as like, oh, you don't get it. Or it's even like, well, you might not get it. Like, I don't know how to use Snapchat. Like, I do not get the issue with that or whatever. But there's the understood relationship that's based on care and love, and that it's like, I'm not annoyed or bothered that you don't understand this situation, but you can hear me out and whatever. And even though I don't know what's happening or whatever, you still care for me and love for me. And there's like a sense of belonging. So I know that wasn't a very like direct, clear-cut answer. But
Well, I don't think there is a direct, clear-cut answer, except there might be, and Crystal might have it.
if anyone does,
No.
Well, do you have any thoughts on this, Crystal? Because, and again, Mark and I are kind of having this conversation from, I mean, a long-term relationship. And so your upbringing is very interesting to me because it's different. I don't know all of that. But do you see the same thing? Do you have friends or do you see younger people being pushed away, or maybe not being pushed away, but running away and not feeling like they belong in the church? And what would be, I mean, because you know the heart of the people, of the older people, that's not their heart. That nobody's intentionally pushing anyone away, but yet seems to be this division. I don't know why.
I don't know how to answer that. I was like trying to think of something. I don't know, the church I grew up in, it was a Hispanic church, Spanish speaking. And I feel like the church did focus a lot on like trying to figure out how to keep youth engaged and how to like best almost like be there for them, especially because in the church, I think my generation was the generation that knew Spanish and English. And so youth groups were in English. They weren't in Spanish, but everything else in church was in Spanish. And for the most part, they always tried to like find a way to be inclusive of that and recognizing like the difference in the way that we were growing up, even just like growing up in the States. Mm-hmm. But really the only, I was trying to think of like a good example of something that kind of like made me think twice about even just going to youth group was one of our youth pastors was preaching, and I don't even remember what he was preaching on, but I remember I was confused and I didn't understand what he was saying. And so I actually rose my hand and told him like, hey, I'm confused about this. Like, can you explain it a little bit more? And he was like, no, like you'll understand later. And it was just like a moment of like, wait, why are you then preaching if we're not going to understand this like message or like what you're trying to like teach us, I guess. And so I think for me, it felt like a lack of desire to have that conversation, even like within a group setting of like, oh, tell me more about what you're confused. Maybe someone else is confused about this too. And so I think that was probably like the only moment that I was like, can I even trust this guy? Like, he doesn't even want to like go further into what he's like preaching. Should I like continue trusting this leadership, or should I like go somewhere else? So that's probably like the only like example that's like concrete that I could think of, but I don't know.
That's a really great example though. And it comes back, I mean, our conversation last week with missionary in Japan, and he was sharing his wife's testimony about how his wife was raised in Japan, Japanese, and how she'd gone to church. She was actually a Christian, which is very rare in Japan. She had gone to church her whole life, but that particular church, like she just went out of that was her tradition. But it wasn't until later on when she was in, I don't know if he said high school or college, where she went to a different church and somebody actually explained the gospel to her in a way that she could understand. The way he described it was that the church she grew up in spoke a very high level of Japanese culture and language. And then this new church that she went to, the preacher spoke down to her level. And I think that's kind of what you're describing here, is that willingness to go down to their level, even if it makes them, if they're unprepared for that or not able to do that or weren't expecting that, but that willingness, I think, goes a long way in establishing what Mark's talking about, the trust and the relationship. And then from there, then you can have those conversations of, I think Mark's example is really relevant to me. Again, young people know that they're stupid. And allowing them to be stupid or make mistakes and do those things, but knowing that they're secure in the relationship, that no matter how stupid you behave or how whatever mistakes you make, that's a part of the growing process, and you're still cared for and loved, and we're going to walk with you throughout the journey. I think that's something that I want to do better. That's all this conversation is right now, is I want to improve. I want to do better. How can I communicate better to this generation, that generation? And then bringing those generations together, boy, is it challenging, huh? And I think a lot of the things that your goal at Student International is well, I don't want to answer for you, but what are the name Student International sounds as though it's just high school students that come, or is there somebody else? What's the basic demographic of a group that comes?
So the average person is probably, I'd say 18, like a high school senior, because we do get college students, high school students, and then sometimes if their parents are there, especially if it's a recurring church that goes every 2 years or something, you'll get a parent who's gone a couple times, and then they'll bring younger teenagers. Okay. So earlier this year at the preschool, I was with them for a week, and there was 2 brothers. They were 13 and 14, and their dad was in the site, so it was okay. Because anytime they got into an argument, we'd be like, Joe, your kids? Like, yep, this is my life. But then, and sometimes we'll get groups of adults of varying ages. A lot of times with the chaperones that come with the college students or the high schoolers, you'll get adults that are maybe the parents or the youth pastor or the college pastor or the head pastor, or they're retired and they're passionate about people seeing Jesus, and so they want to go. So I think too that it's everyone of any age can learn, and I think too that it's a really good and cool uniting experience of the church, and that partnership that forms, especially with the outreach participants and their site leaders and the local staff. Because unless you come here and you know Spanish really well, it's gonna be hard to get on more than like a hi, how's it going level with a lot of people in the community. But you get to spend the whole week with the site leader, and then even that at times too ends up being an intergenerational experience, depending on who your site leader is and all of that.
Awesome. Well, we're running, man, the time goes, it flies. I want to give everybody that's in here, so if you're paying attention, if you're in the group chat, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna enable your video, and that will, and then you get it, you can probably enable your own, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna try and turn on everyone's video, and then, so I will ask to start video. That's what it will be. So, okay. As I ask to start the video, if you decide you want to turn on your video, then you can join the group here in Brady Bunch style, and then we can all wave at the Bunnells, and we can chat with them. And then what we'll do after that is we will pray, and so that's what I'm doing right now. All right, asking, you'll see a thing, it'll say ask to start video. If you want the video, then turn it on. If you don't worry about it. All right, so asking to start video. Now you're also muted, so if you want to Yeah, look at there. So there's all these wonderful folks. Everybody's watching you guys and watching and listening in on our conversation. And it's been really fun and very interesting to me. I hope it's been interesting to you guys as well. Awesome. Yeah. All right. So if anybody has a question, raise your hand if you have a question that you want to give to Mark and Crystal right now, because we're wrapping up our time. And then if you don't have any questions, then I'm going to go ahead and ask them for what are some specific things that we can pray for you guys about. All right. So nobody's got any questions. So what?
There's a question here from Paul's mom.
Oh.
He's like me.
What's your favorite part of Dominican culture so far?
I really, really love that for the most part, besides the pandemic stuff, neighbors all know each other and like can just depend on one another. I got to experience a little bit of that just before, like when we first moved into our apartment with our downstairs neighbor. Her name is Raisa, and she has 2 little girls. They're the cutest ever, but they're also super loud sometimes. But it was just cool to see like how they were with, they like got to know us a little bit, invited us into their home, gave us a little bit of hot chocolate. And then another day, their little girl like came up and wanted to see the house. So we're like, yeah, sure, why not? And even our other neighbor, Luce, she's usually never here, but she had finally like decorated her apartment, was like, please come look at it, and, like pulled me by the arm and brought me in. So I love that a lot.
I just want to point out that when our downstairs neighbor first brought us into their place, we also had like a 80-pound German Shepherd with us. So we attempted with a different dog before we got the little apartment dog. They said it would be fine for an apartment. It was not. But we had the massive guard dog. They're like, yeah, come on in, please stay. We like the dog. You know, the dog jumped on their couch and they were like, oh, okay. You know, so super hospitable. There's that. And then my other favorite part is that, like Crystal was saying, this is the part of me that kind of just likes to go against the grain, but where the Spanish here is really different than what she was used to. And because I'm learning it from talking with people, is that I am now unintentionally can be incredibly offensive to Crystal, because there's certain verbs, I won't repeat them in case you speak Spanish from Mexico and I offend you here, but the verb that we use here for to get, like, can you go get the pencil or something, is super crude and vulgar in Mexico. And there's other words like the word to wash the dishes, to like scrub them, can't say that one. So those are.
This is your favorite part of Dominican culture, is that you are unintentionally vulgar.
My favorite part is that I say things that are completely normal, and then Crystal's like, you can say that here? You just said that to a pastor, Mark.
That's great. That's great. So what can we pray for you guys for?
Well, for
dramatic pause.
Yeah.
The usual stuff with the corona pandemic, especially wisdom for the leaders here and the people that are making decisions, and then the people that are enforcing those decisions. And just because it's like there's no work, people got to go out, restaurants have to open up again, so there's just kind of, we're trying to figure out what to do, but the official rule is don't go out of the house, but everyone's like, okay, we tried that, we can't. But so just for wisdom for the leaders in that, and how to move forward with the situation and realistically, and like, what do we do? But And then also for what has been cool, this is kind of a prayers report with a further prayer, is one of the staff members, two of her brothers decided in the last couple of weeks or so that now they were like, all right, we're not in control of our lives. We gotta follow Jesus now. So for continued growth for the family members who are in those situations, and her specific prayer request was that it wouldn't be just a thing with the pandemic where it's super obvious that we're out of control, but it would be a really life-changing decision.
When you say it's a staff member, is that a Dominican staff member or a foreign staff member?
Dominican staff member.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's been cool, and to see that, and a lot of the Dominican staff are able to keep a lot better contact with people in the communities right now that they've been working with and building relationships with, where like my plan was in March to start doing that every day, and then I got sent home type of thing. So yeah, and then I guess for me, I'm right in the spot of the transition where stuff is like unfamiliar enough, and then compounded with the coronavirus and being stuck at home, where there's some days where I just feel very like useless and out of place. Even though I expected that to be the case right around 4 or 5 months ish. But on those days, especially being stuck at home, it's hard to find motivation to do anything but watch movies. But I haven't had a full movie day yet, so we're doing good. But we still have 21 days at least more to go. So for encouragement and motivation in that, and brain power to comprehend the Spanish and know when I'm being offensive.
And I'll say one more thing too, to the group that's watching. If you're not signed up to get Mark and Crystal's newsletters, you really should. They're fantastic, really great stuff going on. And Mark's got a blog and all kinds of good stuff for you to follow and see what's going on in their lives. They have great updates and they're doing a good job. So we're proud to support you guys. And so I want to invite all of you to join me in praying for Mark and Crystal at this time. Jesus, we thank you for the good reports that we're hearing from Mark and Crystal. We thank you for their shared experience, that we are able to support them, and they're doing great work. Lord, even though the things are so different from what any of us expected, we see that they still have a passion to serve you. They still have a passion for reaching the people in the Dominican Republic and for hosting these teams. We praise God with them for the report of their friend and their friend's brothers that are coming to Christ, and just the idea that people are in fact being drawn to Jesus Christ through this crisis. It really is that's an answer to prayer, because all around the world we're praying for that exact thing, that throughout this fearful and unexpected experience, that people are becoming keenly aware of their lack and how necessary it is to have faith in the King of the universe. And so we believe in you and we rejoice. Lord, we do pray for the wisdom for the people, the government of the Dominican Republic, that they make wise decisions on how things are opened and reopened, and safety and sanitation protocols and all of those things. We pray for Mark and Crystal to not fear that they are that they're not doing the work that they had originally signed up for, but instead, would you speak to them the confirmation that they are your faithful servants? Keep them motivated, give them ingenuity into how to reach, maybe not even focus on reaching their particular area, but there's people that are in their lives that you've given them a relationship with, a connection with, that you're going to increase throughout this time the opportunity for them to minister to them. So I pray for new opportunities. I pray for those opportunities to give them passion and boldness and energy and a clear communication of the gospel. And as we've talked about it here in this time, with Mark and Crystal, and I thank you for their testimony. I thank you for their faithfulness to their obedience to your call. But I also join with them in praying for the next generation, for their generation, to have a sense of how great you are, how great an adventure it is to follow Jesus Christ, how wonderful the peace that comes from knowing that we belong to you and that your promises over us are true and forever. We are beloved by you. And so I pray that the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that, that they all come to know you. Increase our capacity for understanding and for humility, so that we can go to those that are the next generation and really love them and honor them and bring them into a relationship of trust, so that they believe, not only from the words that we're saying, but from the way in which we are saying the truth of the gospel, because there is nothing greater than to know you and to follow after you. So I pray a blessing on Mark and Crystal. I pray a blessing on the Dominican Republic, on the Ministry of Students International. Provide for them, give them great favor, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Go ahead and unmute yourself and say something in cacophony. Make
Hi. Paul, you want to say hi? Paul?
Oh, once Paul's unmuted, now it goes. Go ahead, everybody. You guys.
Buenas noches.
Make some noise.
Buenas noches.
There we go. There's some Spanish. See, there's the echo. It's all wonderful. It's a joyful noise. All right, Mark and Crystal, thank you so much for this time. This has been awesome. You guys are amazing. We love you. We're praying for you always. We didn't even get into your refrigerator stories, but you know, I'm just excited for everything that's going on. You guys are awesome. All right, I'm gonna say goodbye. So that once I say goodbye, everybody says goodbye. I end meeting for all.
Bye.
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 Bye.